Okay, here we go. We are live and in my studio this morning, just having a little chat about the weather. Isn't that funny how we always start with that? And it's so interesting in the chat because you're talking about, the different places where you live all over the world. And, we're having spring here in northern British Columbia, and it's a spring that came with 6 inches of snow this week. I have to go shovel the deck of my studio after this. And 20 below zero, that's Celsius, which I think is below zero for Fahrenheit as well. Anyhow, we are definitely feeling no urge to go anywhere when the snow falls and the wind blows, and it just is better to be indoors. So it's not all bad. But I haven't felt super motivated to paint, to tell you the truth. I've been home, and knowing that you have all this free time to paint, that time is no longer the excuse, it really helps, or it really makes me aware of the fact that I have other reasons why I might hold back from painting. One, of course, is spending time with my family. My children are home, and we've been doing a lot of creative stuff. We've been playing a lot of games. We've been watching shows together, but we've also been cooking, digging out recipes. Beth, I made your tiramisu recipe a week or two ago, and it was a huge hit. And yesterday, my son worked on his deep frying skills and made French fries for us all. So it's just been kind of fun to do that stuff and to see what they get up to. I've been very busy in the Fearless Artist community, which is the part of my site where I have monthly membership access to all of my courses, as well as that interactive community where I do actually weekly live broadcasts. And so for me to be here on YouTube doing a live is a little more rare than it used to be. There's only so many directions I can go. But I also want to think about my personal development as a working artist. I'm always wanting to grow my own skill and develop my own style. And that means I need to also step away from teaching and just paint. And so you're going to be looking over my shoulder as I do that today. Monica asks if I'm still getting my runs in, and no, it's been months. I'm really hoping that the weather gets a little bit better so that that can start happening again. I'm actually quite willing to go out and run in colder weather, but just the motivation just hasn't been there for a lot of things this year. And I'm trying to make peace with that. I think one thing we can do as we're home is kind of make this mental health time where we are aware of those things. At least I'm trying to be aware of areas where I might be struggling, and work on just wrapping my mindset and finding ways to improve and find a little bit of acceptance and peace and motivation in all of this. I want to just show you what we're going to be painting today. We're going to just flip over to my reference photo. This is not my backyard. We were in, Wade and I went to Ireland in 2018. Maureen's here, and she was with us actually on the painting part of the trip. We spent a week painting in County Mayo, and really enjoyed our time in Ireland. It was absolutely beautiful. September is a great time to visit Ireland. And it just was a great experience for Wade and I as well. That was the first time my husband had come with me on a painting trip. And I wasn't sure he was going to be a good, painting caddy, but he was amazing. He took really good care of my students, helped me facilitate all the little details that happen when you're painting and traveling together, and was a really good advocate for me and for my students to our tour director and our hotels and so forth. So that was pretty cool. And now I have this wealth of wonderful reference photos. Let's take a look at a couple of them, actually. This is the one I've chosen to work on right now, but I have more. I flipped through these Ireland photos and just remember the beauty of the space that we were in. This was our these few here are, well, this is, I always forget the name, the Rock of Cashel. Which this photo just does not do it justice to the way it sits on the hillside and just is so beautiful. This was Muckross House, which is in Killarney, I think. All the names start to blur together now. We saw so many places. But Muckross House, we wandered around the gardens there. We didn't go inside, but I had fun trying to teach myself how to paint. This building and all those little chimneys, And that was an experiment. This painting is actually a part of my Heart-Led Landscape course. Actually, we explore that scene, I think, in that course. And this was a river along the way. This was a view from, I believe, just driving along the road, and we stopped and took a photo because how could you not? It was so beautiful. And that was our favorite day in Ireland, was driving through the Ring of Kerry. We didn't go through the whole Ring of Kerry, but we went through the Black Valley and got little lost, ended up on this goat trail, really, and absolutely enjoyed our trip there. And the beauty of Ireland, this is that goat trail I was telling you about. We were just sure we were lost in the middle of nowhere, but that road just kept going, and eventually we ended up on the highway again. And what was really fun was we had internet in our car. We had a Wi-Fi connection. So we would stop every few minutes, and I would post a little video of where we were at to my friends back in Canada. And so that was really fun. We got to share that experience through our travels. So this was one I wanted to paint today, and I just wanted to take a look at it and think about it before we start painting. And really, this is not a lesson as much as me kind of thinking through my own painting process. I would say this is the kind of thing that is really helpful if you've been painting for a little while, you have an understanding of techniques, and you want to be exploring your own personal style, because a step-by-step tutorial isn't necessarily going to teach you that. So this is where it's really helpful to look over the shoulder of an artist who's going through that working out a painting process. And the questions I ask myself are questions you can ask yourself. The explorations I try in my goal of getting to the heart of my scene and expressing my own feelings and memories and emotions about it, these are things you can use for your own painting practice as you think about, how to paint it like you would want to, in a way that really connects with you as a person, and not just what some other artist would do or what other people might like. You really, for us as artists, I think we have a craving to express ourselves. And we don't always recognize it in those early stages of skill building, because at that point, you're really just wanting to show that you know how to paint. And once you realize that you have an understanding of those techniques, that's when you want to go a little bit deeper and actually share what you're feeling and thinking, your emotion. And that's hard. It takes time because we don't always know. My first look at this reference photo is one that's fixed on the details. And my very first version of this scene, let's see here, over here, I did a little study yesterday. And as you can see, it's not very big. I wanted to just sketch it out in a smaller study. But I don't, and I like some of the aspects of this, but I don't really know where I'm going with this. I'm painting what I see. Getting to the emotion of it is going to take me a little bit of time. And so I've got a few little tools here to help me. Yesterday, after I painted this version, it only took me about, 20 minutes maybe to do that first layer. And as that first layer was drying, I was able to come back and paint some details in the second layer. And so this was all painted in one sitting without stopping to walk away. And once I was done, my immediate feeling was that my painting was too small. I couldn't feel free to play with shape and color and have fun with moving my brush because I felt so constrained by the size of the paper. And so you can see that the paper I have here today is quite a bit bigger. It's actually a half sheet of watercolor paper, and the other half is sitting right over here. Excuse me while I drop things on the floor. So this was my knee-jerk reaction painting. This was the immediate response that I had to that first painting. Was I went in and I dashed off this. And this is also a first layer. It needs more. But there are aspects of this. You can see that in a way it is a reaction to that original painting. And it's an opportunity to take a few risks. And I really felt like I wanted to encourage myself to do that as I was painting. I was kind of coaching myself to be more expressive, to let color flow more, to be bolder with my colors. And so the immediate idea was I grabbed the Manganese Violet. Something in me just said, do that purple that you love so much. So I did. I dashed in the lake a little bit, but it's not as much. With this version, I actually did I started with the lake and I built everything out from there. And for this version, the lake is here, but it's a little softer. And I really like, one thing I noticed as I looked at the reference photo was that I hadn't really paid attention to the rocks in my original reference photo. And there were actually quite a lot of rocks popping up in the landscape. And so here I used some sodalite and a palette knife to scrape in these rock shapes. And that feels really good to me. This mark over here feels really good to me. This is progress, I think, and we're going to come back to this version. But I just wanted to show you where I've been so far so you can understand a little bit where I'm going. And one thing that actually was falling short for me on this version, let's look at it one more time, was the half sheet of watercolor paper is, you know, kind of a proportioned like a widescreen TV. It's quite wide, which generally is good for landscapes, but it doesn't, I almost feel like I would have liked a few inches along the bottom of the page to really give me an ability to create a sense of distance and exaggerate that sense of distance maybe a little bit more. And I like working with traditional sizes for watercolor because it does make it easier to frame them. I have frames for half sheets of watercolor paper in the studio, but so I don't like to change my proportions too much. I like to work square. I like to work in these half sheets or quarter sheets of watercolor paper or full sheets, and you know, maybe 8 by 10. A quarter sheet of watercolor paper is pretty close to an 11 by 14. It's actually 11 by 15. And so those are all very traditional sizes. As soon as I start messing with my sizes, then I have to start thinking about custom framing, and that starts getting expensive. And for me, I don't worry about the cost as much as just actually making the time to order a frame and get all of that done. It's a pain in the butt. So I don't organize myself to do framing very often. So I like to stick with these traditional sizes. I know I have them on hand. If I have to, I can unframe something and pop it in. So here I have the same half sheet, but I've turned it so it's vertical, and that's going to give us a little bit of a different scope for our painting. I'm going to give it a try and see if it works better to give me that sense of distance. And these differing versions of my scene are my chance to explore my what ifs. You know, my very first what if, I've showed you my second what if, and we're going to continue making progress on that. But we're going to start with exploring this third what if. But I thought before I would do that, I want to think through my intention for the painting. And that's going to take a minute. And I thought what I would do is make some notes, maybe some keywords to help guide me as I look at my reference photo and think about what I might want to see in this next version. So let's take a look here. Okay, so keywords. Let's take a look at our reference photo and see what we're doing. I just had a quick check into the chat to make sure you could still hear me and I wasn't having any technical difficulties. I try to check back on that periodically through the live stream. What do we see in this reference photo that we might want to bring out? We want a feeling of scope and distance, perhaps. I'm very much struck by that. So we're going to write that down. Something I like about this reference photo is there's also scope and distance that gives you a feeling, an emotion that would be maybe something of elevation or awe. So we'll put that down. Also, maybe I'm seeing definitely a feeling of peace and just pausing to reflect. And so we'll put that down. So we're wanting a painting that's going to give us, should have had a bigger board, shouldn't I? Maybe a feeling of calm. The energy that we're going to have in this painting is going to be a very peaceful energy. And I want to be feeling that as I paint, and I want to be intending that for my brush strokes. That will help me keep that emotion going. We want people to feel something when we see our paintings. We need to know what we want them to feel in order to put that into our scene. You know, and these are things that are what's the word? Take priority over the details in the scene, the technical stuff. More important than positioning all the elements correctly are the mood and the feelings that we want to convey. I really like the kind of ruggedness. There's a rugged contrast. And I think that's a really good phrase to help guide why something should be placed in the painting. I want rugged contrast. That means I need soft, fuzzy bushes and strong contoured rocks. Maybe I want bright blue sky and then softer, gray shadows in the clouds. There's beautiful shadows actually on the distant hills. If you look at the hills off in the distance, the sunlight is falling on them. And so we see a warm kind of washed out yellow color. And then we see that kind of violet blue shadow. And so that's something else we can look for. So we're going to underline contrast here. And we'll put down sun and shadow. And it's interesting because the sun and shadow are stronger off in the distance. In the foreground, our shadows are very even. We see some shadow, but it's more from an overcast light. And so off in the distance, the sun is breaking through and casting onto our distant hills, but it's not doing the same strong contrast between sun and shadow nearer to us. And I think that's something that I can realize as I pay attention to my painting or my photo, and I want to work that into my painting. Okay, so the other thing I want to be aware of is I need to be willing to let go. I want to let go of my obligation to make it look like this precise place. It's not necessary for me. If my goal is to convey a certain mood, it does not have to be realistic. And I'm just going to pop the reference photo up so we can see it as we work. And I'm going to create that first layer of color. And I think I want to create it with a lot of softness and then perhaps build up color in a second layer. Having a lot of softness is going to give me the chance to blend my greens together. And I'm going to have to be a little bit imaginative because my reference photo and my paper are not the same orientation. Now that I'm working vertically, I'm going to have to take some artistic license. And that's actually a really good thing because that's going to push me to paint more from me than from my photo. And one place where I really get hung up a lot of the time is in trying to copy that reference photo. And the better I get to know it and the more I paint it, the more free I feel to pursue my own style. I'm going to try to mention some of the colors I'm using just so that you know what they are. Again, the best way to paint with confidence is to work with colors you know well. You can predict what they're going to do. So then you almost have an instinct for what colors to choose. I'm mixing right now a lavender and a Cinereous blue. Lavender is made by Daniel Smith and the Cinereous blue is made by Sennelier. And you can see they make a really pretty color. I mixed them together for the first time yesterday. So I'm exploring what they do. Let's see here. This brush, by the way, is just a big flat brush. It's a 2-inch flat. And it's really old. I've actually wrapped the handle with tape because the paint was flaking off. And not pretty anymore. And that's going to be my sky. I like keeping the sky quite simple. We're going to soften a bit. The deal with working with a big brush like this is it really forces you to paint in a loose way, but it also holds a lot of water. And so you can flood your painting really quickly, which is sometimes a good thing. But be aware that you are going to be carrying a lot of water to your painting. And so as soon as you start touching your painting with a big flat brush, after you've put this wet paint down, I mean it's dripping right now, I usually blot it a bit just because I don't want to flood my painting quite that much. But that's just my big sky took, 2 brush strokes, and now I don't have to think about it again. So we're going to walk away from that. Let's see here. I'm working top down, and for me that feels like a good way to work for landscapes. Often this is my choice. I'm going to prop up I've got this little box, it's about 1.5 inches deep, and I like to use it to prop up my painting so that gravity helps me to see everything flowing down if I'm working from a top-down approach. We are going to use the Manganese Violet again for our hills. I do want a little feeling of sunlight, so I'm going to place a hill, and then I think I'll leave a little white gap where the sun's going to be falling on the landscape. But and this is another flat brush. I'm liking the confidence a flat brush brings to a painting because it creates such strong edges. I don't know, I've just been enjoying that. When I first started using a flat brush, it was really, my goal was to kind of break myself of habits. Every time I try to surprise myself when I'm painting, this is Schmincke's Manganese Violet. Anytime I try to surprise myself when I'm painting, I create opportunities for new creativity to happen. And so trying a new brush is a really good way to kind of break out of a rut. I need to order more of this color. I'm almost out. And my usual art supplier doesn't carry it. But if I run out, then that's an opportunity to try some new colors that might open up new possibilities. Again, surprising myself to creativity. I'm kind of pausing here right now. I'm not rushing, and because my whole painting, is wet on dry at this point. I just have paint up here, so I don't have to worry about the lower half of the painting, but I can take my time and just think about what my painting might need in this part of this scene. And I try to never paint with urgency. Being in a rush is not the same as painting quickly. Let's place some water. Actually, that water I think is too high. I think I'm going to want to put my water right in here, just a little up from the center. So I'm just going to soften that and let it flow. And that's one of those unexpected problems that's created when you start working with a different orientation, different proportions in your scene. That actually kind of works. I think we can figure it out from there. So let's let that live. Another color that I established in my earlier versions was a yellow. So I've got a blue and I've got a violet. This painting is very cool so far. I was using Mars Yellow, and it's very much like a raw sienna, but I was using Mars Yellow for my yellow. And so we're going to add some of that in here. And hope that creates our kind of sunlit areas. And because I've painted this 1.5 times already, and I have painted other scenes from very near to this location, from the same day's reference photos, I have some knowledge that I'm bringing with me into this painting. And when we paint the same subject or something very similar to, subjects that we know, we get to bring all kinds of information into our painting that we don't have if we're kind of like pinball. We paint all kinds of different subjects, so we never linger on one. If I've been painting a lot of hills or a lot of Green Ireland scenes or a lot of trees, when I go to paint that subject again, I have so much knowledge I can draw from and so many strategies that I've developed. And so I like to kind of work in That's why that's why I taught myself to paint landscapes, and I painted landscapes for several years before I really started to feel like I was getting developing my own style and my own voice in my landscape paintings. The manganese violet, at least this particular one, really granulates beautifully. There's a lot of beautiful sediment that's happening here. And I'm really just trying to let the beauty live. If you've followed me for a while, you've heard that phrase. If you put a beautiful brushstroke on your painting, you don't need to define it. You don't need to quantify it. Just enjoy it and let it exist. It doesn't have to be a thing. It doesn't have to be perfectly proportioned or super realistic. Now, one color I didn't use in previous versions that I'm going to try today is this Cascade Green from Daniel Smith. And the Cascade Green, you could actually see it in my palette well. There's like a turquoisey sheen to the edges of the palette well. Let's get a little closer. Can you see the turquoise that kind of lingers around the edge? That is because this paint separates, and it goes on as a green, but as it starts to bleed, you can already see a turquoise kind of coming to life here. And we're going to really angle this, and we're going to create a lot of softness flowing down the page at this stage. I want to create an underpainting that I can use for my next layer, and everything from here down I think is going to be very, very soft. Let's use even more gravity at this stage. I'm going to put a Kleenex box under my painting. We're going to let things really flow. You can see the Cascade Green separating and granulating. And when I first bought Cascade Green, I really found it difficult to work with. Because of the shade of green that it is, it's a little bit kind of got a cloudy, bluey, murky kind of color. I don't know what the color theorists would describe it as, but that's how I'm describing it. And so I was trying to use it the same way I would use a more yellow-green, and it was just a struggle for me. So it took some time to get to know the color and then to start to see the possibilities for what that color could achieve in my paintings. And you can see it's achieving really pretty textural marks here. That might be all I need for this painting. It might be all I need for adding, my shrubs in the distance here. I'm not sure. I'm just adding water at this point. There are a few little white spots of dry paper, but mostly I want to have all of this be very fluid. Landscape paintings are generally made up of line. I always kind of look for the horizontal lines in my landscapes, and they angle, they zigzag, they move you through the scene. And so we're working to create that kind of with the back and forth motion. I'm going to add some more of the Mars yellow, and I'm making it quite bold and dark, which may or may not be a mistake. Mistakes are what make your paintings unique. Let's add a little water to encourage some flow. And if you're in real need of some calming energy, one of the best things you could probably do in watercolor would just be to add lots of water and watch paint flow, because it's really beautiful. Letting those colors mingle, watching them drip down the page. It's a little bit of magical art beauty. Now, I'm not the only person doing creative works of art in this building today. My studio is above our garage, and underneath me, my husband is building a car. And it's let me see if I can get this right, a 1968 Dodge Charger this time. And the hardest thing for him, he's at the stage where he's sanding and getting it ready for paint, and he's decided to paint it himself. So he's taken on a big job. And the hardest thing I think he's found so far is figuring out what color to paint it. It's tough. Every color looks great. Okay, we're letting things flow. I'm pausing to look at it, and I'm trying to decide how much detail I want to place along the bottom of the painting, how much color I want to use here. Down here with our landscape paintings, the foreground is always, the way a camera works is the foreground is always the stuff that's nearest to the camera, and so the most detail lies there. And yet if you paint all of that detail that you see in your photo, and this is one of the limitations of working from photographs, if you're painting all of that detail, you might find that the viewer's eye gets anchored down to the bottom of the page, and they don't travel through the painting in the way that you might want them to. And so we have to think of strategies. And for me, one of the strategies I really like is just leaving some white space at the bottom of the painting, and just suggesting some of that detail with some crisp edges. I'm going to touch in a little bit of zoisite here, and then let's maybe try to put in some of those rocks. I'm trying to decide where the best place to position them would be. The zoisite is a dark kind of gray-green, and it has beautiful texture to it. And I am covering up a little bit of my Cascade green, but remember that with watercolor being transparent, you're never really covering anything. You're just layering. One thing I like about this little flat brush, it's a little bit stiffer than most of my brushes, so it creates really nice kind of parallel lines. And I think I started to mention, I'm not sure if I finished my sentence, that's a hazard of painting and talking. I mentioned that when I first started using this brush, it felt really, my brush strokes felt really wrong, really amateurish, really awkward, and it took me a while to kind of acclimate myself to this new style of brushwork and to see possibilities for it. It wasn't that I stopped making those brush strokes that felt so wrong at first. It was more that I kind of got to know them and actually learned how to welcome them into my painting. And Nancy Hillis, who's the author of The Artist's Journey, one of my favorite books on creativity, she talks about your kind of raw, ugly pieces, the paintings that you really don't think, that maybe look like a kindergartner painted them and you feel like an artist of your caliber should be doing better than that. Those are actually the seeds, the embryos of your future work. And because they're so raw and unformed, you know, they look foreign and alien to us. And it takes time, you know, for us to develop that new stage. I'm just touching in water right now and seeing what that creates in terms of texture. Creating texture in this place on the painting, that's going to carry me up into this part of the painting. I really want the viewer to travel through the painting and into here before they come back down and look at the more detailed areas. And so adding some darks here, balancing them out, this large dark area with this smaller one, and this tiny little one even creates another little jumping off point, a little anchor point to land on. And so those little dark marks really bring the eye through the scene. This is feeling pretty. It's very foreign to what the reference photo looks like, and I don't want to feel like I'm bound to paint exactly what I see in my reference photo. The reference photo is my jumping off place. So often we talk about taking artistic license as, oh, I'm going to not paint that one tree. But artistic license is so much more than that. Artistic license means you make all the decisions for your painting. And you really can get truly imaginative. And that can be really exciting and really freeing if you're taking full advantage of your artistic license. Okay, that's a rock that probably was poorly placed. But we're gonna just see where we can go with this. Let's put another one here. This is Sodalite Genuine. It goes down almost like a black or an indigo, but as it dries, it usually gets a little lighter. A lot of the colors I'm working with today are Primatex from Daniel Smith. Primatex are mineral-based pigments, and they have a lot of sedimentary qualities to them. They really do create a lot of texture just in the way they dry and separate, and they're mineral-based. And so they're often, some of them have shimmery qualities, some of them have kind of reflective qualities where they look one color at first and then they dry to another. Some of them, hematite is one that actually comes in multiple colors. There's a hematite burnt scarlet, which is one of my favorites. It's a red-brown, whereas the traditional hematite is actually a, I don't know, I'm trying to think how to describe it. It's closer to maybe a raw umber. It's a kind of a dull gray-brown or something, I'm not sure. Debating where to put another rock. I've got a rock here. I've been working in this section, so there's a temptation to put another rock there, but I almost wonder if I should put it kind of here. Let's just try it. Let's take a risk. The paper is a different level of dryness in this area, and so it's moving a little differently, and that's okay. Because I'm using a palette knife, I'm really working with some strong saturations of pigment, and then it gets drawn out into those softer areas. And I can also work with some line here. The first day I tried using a palette knife on my painting, it felt like a breakthrough. It was so exciting. And let's add some rock or some grass to kind of frame that rock, so it's not all alone there. This little flat brush that I'm using, I know everyone's asking you, Joe, and you have no idea what it is hard to find. When I started looking for, I just found it at an art supply store when I was in Montreal, and then when I started trying to look for it online so I could use it as a referral for you, I had a hard time finding it. It is a Vinci synthetic Mottler, Mottler. That is this, I guess, the purpose of the brush. So it's the Vinci Forte synthetic. The size is 20 millimeters, and I'm really enjoying using it to bring that kind of unexpectedness. My traditional way of working, that's actually working really nicely. My traditional way of working is to work with very soft brushes, and so to go in with this kind of stiffer, snappy brush that creates a very different brush stroke. It feels exciting. It feels like a new way of working for me that I'm really enjoying. I have a lot of pure Mars yellow on my brush right now. I'm just going to use a very light touch, just kind of feather it in here. I've been using the phrase tickle it in because I kind of like that idea, tickling paint. Let's just be crazy. Now, a painting like this, you're thinking this is the first layer, and obviously we're not going to have time during this broadcast to allow it to dry to go to a second layer. One thing we could do is plan to meet up next week and continue. It's not a big deal for me to wait a week between starting and finishing a painting. Sometimes I wait months. That's just the way my process works. These spots are too dotty. Let's tickle them some more. I'm using a really fine dagger striper. If you've been following me for any length of time, you'll see that I do use these fine dagger striper brushes to create fine lines. I'm using them right now to drag out those little spotty bits that we're feeling a little too round. And dragging it through this yellow actually gives me tiny little fine marks. But okay, so what I was saying, we could come back, but really what I want you to know is I'm probably not going to do very much to this in the second layer. I'll probably do a little bit, so yeah, we can try to meet up again. Maybe even Saturday, I can't promise it, but I can send out an email when I get my dates figured out. So if you're on my mailing list, you will hear about it. And if you're not on my mailing list, I try to make that very easy for you. Go hang out at my website for a few minutes, angelafair.com, and that's where I do send out. Have a mailing list for you to sign up for. I've got lists of supplies that I love to use, links to content that can help you if you're teaching yourself watercolor. And most of us are teaching ourselves watercolor. You know, there's only so much you can learn from a video before you have to go to the studio and muddle through on your own. And so it's going to feel like you don't know what you're doing a lot of the time. And you may have heard me say things like, I don't know what's going to happen in this painting, because I really don't. You know, we're just, now that I've moved to this fine brush, I'm enjoying putting a little bit of line in. But you know, every painting is a question mark. And it's an opportunity to ask yourself, what if I try this thing? And then see what happens when you do. And if you're not willing to take a risk, it's pretty hard to have a breakthrough. So be willing to spend some time muddling around with paint. This feels a little bit too white. There needs to be some color in there, but I feel like if I add it now, I'm going to get some blotchiness. So I'm going to stop, I think, on this version. Let's just flatten it out so we can take a look. Remember that I've had it angled up quite at a sharp angle so that I have that movement coming down. You can see this pure, I'm going to try to zoom in a little bit so you can see some things. And then we're just going to move around a little bit on the paper. This is what I'm watching as I'm painting. I really like the textural things that are happening through my painting, and I want to encourage those as I paint. So, you know, those little, let's turn that reference photo off for a minute. So I want to let those little things live, and we can really kill a painting by feeling like we need to add more detail. And then we cover up all that beautiful stuff. Look at how in this area, wow, I like that. Didn't even know I was doing it. I had that little fine dagger brush. This one is a Neef Kazan brush, 1/4 inch. Cheap Joe's Art Stuff, if you're in the States, makes their Scroggy's Loose Goose Dagger Striper. Again, that's all linked up on my website under my favorite supplies. And I can add some links to the description below the video once I wrap up here as well. In here, you know, we get this negative painting that's happening because I was pulling down with this brush and letting some of that color flow downwards. And there's these beautiful little gaps in there that just are so precious, precious and pretty. The palette knife created the textural marks here. And you know, we dripped water in this area, and that created, I did it. You were just watching. I dripped water in this area, and that created these little edges in the texture of the zoisite. I dragged with that Forte synthetic brush, pulling those little comb marks through here. We have all of this variation happening, and that makes this part of the painting really beautiful. And I think that's what I want people to kind of linger over as they go through the painting. Perhaps once this is dried, some crisp marks to show us that lake might be a good idea. It might carry us through that feeling of moving into the painting, just like we're taking our viewer on a journey. And so we'll see. This is a painting in progress, and often This first layer, because I'm a loose and intuitive painter, my goal is heart lead painting, and my goal is to paint what makes me happy. Heart lead as in what feels really good to put down on the paper right now, and let those beautiful things live, whether or not they match the reference photo, or whether or not other people understand what I'm trying to show them. People probably aren't going to instantly look at this painting and go, oh, that's Ireland. But hopefully I make them feel a sense of awe and beauty, that peaceful, what was my little card, that scope, that distance and awe. Maybe this painting gives them a chance to kind of pause and think about some beauty that they've seen, or remind them of a place they've been to. I want that emotion to come through first of all. So as this is drying, I'm going to be thinking about this painting. I want to give the painting a chance to dry. I do not blow dry. I don't blow dry because there's organic things happening. With this Cascade Green, you can really see the blue undertones here. There's kind of a coppery green that's sitting on top of it. And as it's drying, the paint is continuing to soak in and change color and mingle with the other colors around. And so I let the paint do that. I let it do its part in my painting. One thing I did do was I blotted excess moisture. I'll do it one more time from around the edges. When that excess moisture sits on the paper, actually there's a little bloom here because a little puddle of moisture was sitting there. And so sometimes around the edge of your painting, you might see those blooms and marks from that excess water pushing back into the painting as it was drying. A bloom here and there can be quite beautiful. There's one up in my sky that I really like. But I probably don't want a border of blooms because I didn't blot that water away from the edges. It's going to continue to dry, and as it's drying, my brain is working, processing what I've just done and what I might want to do next, so that when I come back to my painting, in my mind's eye, I'm already seeing that next step. And for me, that's really important. It's an important part of the learning process. So that's something I'm always thinking about and paying attention to, giving myself time to process. And yeah, I am pausing right now. I see a question from Lori Louise about my paper. I am using Arches today. They're 140-pound cold press. Sometimes I call it Arches, which most of us do, but I spoke to someone who used to work for them, and that's how he pronounces it, so I guess I should correct myself. Joe's been here moderating. Joe is so knowledgeable about supplies, and he often gives substitutions for things I'm using that maybe you can't source in your area, so I think that's really helpful. Joe knows a lot. You know more about Vinci paint products and brushes too, I think, than I do. Any other questions here? Let's take a look. Judy says, I have problems with the dagger brushes splitting. Any insight? I tend to dry my brushes flat and then put them upright in a container, a cup or something. But I don't know how much of a difference that makes for drying. Personally, if my brushes split, often I figure out a way to use them in my paintings to create some new marks that maybe they wouldn't have made if they were in their proper shape. But if you're really struggling with a brush that's lost its shape, you can dip it in, I think, gum arabic, and then reshape it and allow it to dry and then rinse it out again. That sometimes can help. I was thinking I would do a little bit more work on, actually we will. We've got a little bit of time. I've got about 12 minutes here, so I think I might just switch over to that other painting that I had set aside, and we can do a few minutes of just adding some detail there. Then that way I can show you that logical next step and how I might develop it. Please note that I'm going to be taking my time with that. I'm probably not going to finish it today either, because when you start to think about finishing a painting, those are important decisions. You do not want to rush yourself. You do not want to paint beyond that logical next step that you can see. And if I see so many people's paintings ruined by overworking out of anxiety. So you want to come in and continue your painting in the same spirit in which it was started, in which it was begun. And you want to be aware that my camera's like slowly tilting. Let's try to fix that. There we go. You want to be aware that what you're thinking and feeling is going to be reflected in your painting. I wanted to have a tree here, so I'm just trying to put that tree shape in. And I'm using palette dirt for this because this is the color I was using on this painting. It's a little combination of most of the colors we were already using in our session today, with the exception of this painting not having the Cascade green. I've placed those first strokes, and now I'm just going to soften and pull down some branches or tree trunks, combination of water and paint. This brush is so fun for making these scribbly marks, and it's a really fun warm-up to spend time in mark making. Channel your inner calligrapher. Sometimes I pretend I'm doing Chinese writing because, of course, it looks very artistic to me. I can't read it, I can't understand it, so I'm looking at it from a visual aspect, and it can be really fun to try to kind of echo some of those marks that we see that look so poetic. So we've just hinted at the shape of a bush over here. Maybe we want to reinforce some of our distant trees. And I'm going to go back and forth between brushes here, I think. One thing I like to really think about with second layers is that I want it to be very hard for people to be able to tell what was painted first and what was painted last. So I don't want my second layer to be pasted on. So often I'll place those crisp brush strokes and then I soften them to blend them into the painting. And so I'm pulling color down. Here I'm using a little bit of zoisite. That's that same dark greeny gray. And then I'm softening again. You know, there's something about, one thing I realized that I really like is looking for art in nature. Sometimes, you know, you're walking maybe along the shore and you see a tangle of driftwood and it looks like art, just the way it's arranged. And you know nobody did that. It just kind of spilled onto the shore and the water receded, and then you see this beautiful kind of pattern that looks like art. Maybe it's a pattern of birds flying through the sky. And you know, there was no human intervention there. And as an artist, that draws me. And so I really realized that I want my paintings to have that feeling too, almost. Very, very natural. I want that to feel like the artist let the paint do its thing, you know, that I was there maybe a little bit, but you know, I want so much of my painting to feel unscripted, just the same way as, you know, that tumble of driftwood, that arrangement of rocks and shells that I saw when I was walking, you know, along the path. And so a few brush marks are good, but I really do like letting the painting, you know, a few marks, I shouldn't say brush marks, but a few intentional shapes, I don't mind. But there is a part of me that it really is drawn to trying to make my paintings look as natural and fluid as possible. With that said, I'm kind of liking those crisp lines there. So I'm going to tell you one thing and do another. Artistic license. Just a reminder again, I said it once, but I'm going to say it again. At the end of the day, we are all teaching ourselves to paint. And the rules that you might be hearing or trying to follow, you know, they're optional. When you're learning technique, there are a lot of things that will help you paint more confidently or get the paint to do what you want it to do. Those rules are helpful for that. But at the end of the day, you get to decide. which rules you're going to follow, which ones you're going to break. You get to choose what kind of artist you're going to be. And almost all anyhow, of the artists that we remember today are artists that were rule breakers in their time and in their space. And a lot of them received a lot of criticism for what they were doing. And, that should free us. The artists that, I often think of Kazimir Malevich. He's the artist who painted a big black square on a white canvas and was exhibiting that. And because of him, and people, there were people who really criticized his work, said he was a nihilist, I never know how to pronounce that. They saw that as a desire to destroy, and yet because of artists like him, we get to do whatever we want. People that were willing to break the rules and be misunderstood. So a little bit of line in here, and I think those crisp lines are going to pull us right into that water. And I'm just amping up the ultramarine blue a little bit here. See, my brush is splitting now too. Just going to try to work with it. And then maybe let's soften here. Just a wet brush to let some color flow. And that might be all I do today. I really don't want to belabor any points here. I don't want to overdo one area and then feel like I'm obligated then to add detail to every other spot. And so my goal here is to work within restraint. A few lines here, a few lines there. Then I'm not overcommitting myself. I'm not pushing myself to a level of detail that I don't really want or that my painting doesn't really need. So it's really helpful to pull back and get perspective from time to time. See, that almost is too busy. So I'm just going to soften it again. And that's what I'll be doing with this painting is, I might spend 5 minutes with a little bit of brushwork, and then I pull back, give myself a chance to see it with fresh eyes. Sometimes I do a painting and it feels really, really exciting in the moment, and then I come back to it and it just feels like it needs something more. Whereas other times I'm keep adding that something more and I realize that I've overworked it. So taking that break to step back, give yourself perspective is really, really helpful. Okay, I think I am going to stop painting now. This has been about an hour's session of painting here for me and for you. And that is really where, how much time I might usually invest in a painting session. I try to pay attention to my body language because I paint standing. I don't want to stiffen up or tighten up or hurt my back as I'm bending over my work surface. My tables are counter height, so I don't have to bend too far. But body language affects how my painting goes down on the paper, how loose and fluid my paintings are. And so I do pay attention to how my back's feeling or my neck. And I want to move. That's why I stand. I want to have that free movement. And so we keep just working with our limitations. Some of the things that I do because I don't know a better way. And until I learn a better way, I paint it that way. And I'm always trying to paint just what feels the most beautiful to me at the time. And taking those frequent breaks helps me to get out of my own head and just to really stay focused on the painting and on that freedom that I want to express. So now's a good time to go take a break, have a coffee. In a few hours I might come back and peek at these paintings again, or I might save them for next week and we'll add some finishing touches then. Thanks for joining me for this live stream today. I don't do these on YouTube very often anymore. It was nice to have Joe back to moderate for me. Thank you for being here, Joe. Joe was with me every week when we were doing weekly live streams, but since I've started being very busy with my online community, my Fearless Artist community, which is where all of my courses are located, And I do weekly live streams there, so that just takes as much of my time as I can spare most of the time, but it's really helpful to be home right now and to be able to do this a little bit more often. Barring, because I do share my space with my car building husband. When he's quiet in the shop, I can run a video here and there. So thanks for joining me today. Again, I will try to add some links to some of the supplies I used today immediately following this broadcast. So come back or refresh the page in about 20 minutes, and I should have that here for you. Thanks for being here, and we'll see you very soon. Go do some painting. Paint for fun. Paint from your heart, and you will make amazing stuff. Bye for now.